Hi, welcome to some pincushion ideas that we're doing. We're doing 20 different pincushion ideas at the moment. We're doing one a day, each day for 20 days. And there's going to be patterns and things available and a video for each one. And it's all on the website on GourmetQuilter.com. And I'm GourmetQuilter, I'm Susan Clare. And so if you have already signed up to receive the pattern on GourmetQuilter.com, you'll have something that looks a little bit like this to download and print. For this one we're now doing pincushion number 11, so we're just getting through them quite fast. Or it seems fast, I guess it's only one a day. So I'm just going to show you this one that we're doing today. It's just a very little tiny one. I've called it a Dingle Dangle triangle pincushion because it's just a little dingly dangly triangle. So it's very cute. My idea was that you could perhaps loop it onto some scissors or onto something else, or not. Just have a little tiny pincushion for those times when that's all you need. So we're going to go ahead. So it's great for using up some really tiny little pieces. We're doing a little bit of foundation piecing. We have done foundation piecing on a previous pincushion, but we're going to do it a little bit differently this time. So great for those tiny leftovers, a real user-upper of little bits. So what we've got here in the pattern, there's a full-size pattern for what we're doing here for us to trace onto. So I've already gone ahead and traced, but I'll just quickly go through that process to show you. On a light box or a light source of some sort, it's quite a good idea to have everything on there. You could just do it random. You wouldn't have to have lines. If you're confident to just go ahead and sew, that's fine. I find I quite like to have a few lines. So on the pattern we've got a seam line marked, we've got a cutting line, and we've got a size of the actual piece of foundation. So we're working on a foundation fabric which will stay in. We won't see it, it's inside. And we'll be trimming it down afterwards. That just gives us a little bit of room to move when we're making things. So you can see through if you just use some plain fairly light coloured fabric to go inside, as long as you can see your lines that you're drawing is the main thing. And we can just use a ruler and we can just trace them. So you don't even have to move it, you can just move the ruler. I've already done mine, but this is what I did. I just shifted that ruler from side to side and drew my lines. So quite straightforward, and it's just quite helpful to have some lines to follow, at least to get started. So these are my lines, and now we're going to sew. When we've sewn the last time, we sewed on top. This time we're going to be sewing, well, we're sewing on this side, but we're going to have the fabrics on the other side. So if you've done paper piece foundation work, it's a little bit more similar to that. So what I'm going to do, I've just got some little strips here. They're only fairly narrow, so they're about the width of this piece of foundation, but even that is a little bit variable because we're trimming them down a little bit less afterwards. But because they're on an angle, they do need to have a little bit of extra length to the finished size. So what I'm going to do here, and sometimes you need a light box, but because I've got plenty of light here and I've got light coloured fabric I can see through, I'm just going to position that behind. So one thing you might want to do is possibly finger press those drawn lines so that you can see where that line is on the other side, so that you can position it. And so we're going to just stitch along that line that I've just folded, which is the same as the drawn line on this side. And so I'll just go ahead and start doing it. I think rather than just trying to talk it through, it's easier just to show you. So I'm just going to stitch on that line. Now we're not taking the foundation out, it stays in, so that's quite good. And we can just really probably just finger press that back rather than, you can use the iron if you want to. It really is entirely up to you whether you want to have the iron out for every strip when they're only little like this. And so now we want to line the next one up with the next sewing line here. So the chances are you can probably see, because we're just working with small pieces, that that is beyond that line by approximately 1/4 inch. Again, if you had wanted to, you could have finger pressed all the lines so that you can flip it back and see it's this one here that we're sewing on. We're going to be trimming some of that other off in a second. So I'll just do this next row. So once you realise that you're really just stitching and flipping all the way along at an angle, it's really quite straightforward. So having done that, I now just want to trim that seam. The first one we kind of lined up, so we didn't need to trim it particularly. But from here on in, it's a good idea. And I usually just trim on something this small, just a little bit less than 1/4 of an inch. Not too much less, but just a little bit. And then again, just press that over. And then we'd go on and we'd put our next piece on. So we're putting the fabrics right sides together, but we're wanting to line up with that line for the next seam. And we can do that again and again. So I won't keep going because I've actually already done one here, but I think you've got the hang of it now. We're really just stitching and flipping them over, and the lines are all at just random angles. But I have actually already got one done here, now that you know how to do all that. So that's looking quite fun. There's nothing that needs to match particularly, it's just a matter of sewing those lines, but it does now need trimming. So I'm going to, I have just drawn my finished line on there, so I'm just going to trim all the excess off this, but leave my seam allowance on there so that it's got the fabric we need when we're making it up. So I think this is going to look quite fun. It's a great little pincushion to have a little handy one like this. So that's it all trimmed up. It's going to turn into something a lot like that very shortly. So that's looking really cute. So what we do now is just join up the two short edges, but we need a little gap for turning. So we need to leave a gap in that seam. It's the easiest one to leave a gap in. So we're just going to need to do a short bit at each end of that seam. So having done all that, that's looking really good. Would probably be helpful at this stage just to put a marker pin in the centre here, and we want to put a little cord. So I've suggested a really fine cord. You might make your own braid, you might have something that you want to use in there. I've suggested it's something fairly thin simply because I want to be able to loop it onto perhaps a scissor handle or something like that. So we've got a length of cord, we just want to tie a knot in it, so I've already gone ahead and done a knot. So just any sort of a knot, because the knot is going to live inside, you won't see the knot. But we do want to position the knot right in this little point here, so hence the pin. So I'm just going to stick that in there. Now the knot can stick up so that you know where it is, but you want it to sit right in that little fold there, that piece of cord, because that's going to be this little top corner here. So I'm going to stitch now along this edge here, including the little bit of cord at the end, which it may want to travel a little bit, so just make sure you've pushed it right down into that corner. So just and do a little back stitch over the cord. That should be now nice and secure. You've probably got a loop sitting at the other end. Because the knot's there, if it's not caught in the stitching, it will hold anyway, so that's okay. So just make sure you push that cord inside now. And now what we want to do is have an idea where the centre is there, and then we're going to open this out and bring that seam to the centre on that side, so that we get this unusual shape going on here. And now we want to stitch across there, because we've left our gap here in that first seam. We've got somewhere to turn it through, so we're just taking this seam at the opposite direction to the other one, basically. Tricky. Stitch across there. Make sure that you haven't left any little gaps, because I'm going to be using the crushed walnut shell. If you're using something like that, you don't want any little holes that it can escape from. So that's the unusual shape that we're dealing with. And now I'm just going to clip those little corners, just to help those corners. Don't clip your stitching that you've just done. And don't clip your knot off either, so we might leave that one. And now we just want to turn it out through our little gap there. Now because we've got the foundation in there, that's going to be quite a good little buffer because I'm going to use the crushed walnut shell. It's too small to try and include something like a binding, but that second layer of fabric, don't make that layer too heavy because on something like this you don't want anything too much in there. This is such a cute little pincushion. Let's grab my little trusty pencil for turning. And so that corner there with the cord will just pull itself up with the cord, and just make sure your other corners are sitting out nicely, and then we just need to fill it and then hand stitch it closed. You can't get much quicker and more fun than that, and using up all sorts of little bits of fabric at the same time. So that's ready now for me to fill, so I'll go ahead and put some filling in there. It's not going to take very much. Doesn't have to be the walnut shell, could be whatever it is that you've got. You could use things like sand in a pincushion, just a warning of sand if you're going to collect your own sand from a beach or a river. Beach sand will have salt in it, which won't help your needles and pins, it will make them rust. And river sand may be a little bit muddy, so you just would need to make sure that it was going to be fully cleaned if you were going to collect your own sand. Of course you can get other sand that you wouldn't have to do that to. So have a little squidge around and see that you think it's got enough in there. I think it probably has. It doesn't need to be absolutely bursting, so to me that looks alright. So I'm just going to go ahead and hand stitch that, and I'll just show you then how we might use it on some scissors or something. So I've gone ahead and stitched up my little gap, and the beauty of this is you can barely even see where the join is. It's just so much fun. So I just think that's a great little pincushion. You could just use it just sitting near you, just to have a couple of pins if you're just working on a small project where you just need a couple of things going on. Or you could just hang it on your scissors if you're going out and about sewing and you need to take a little pincushion with you. That'll just loop onto there nicely. You could embellish it, you could put a little bead on it, you could do so many things. So that's the little Dingle Dangle triangle pincushion. I hope you've enjoyed that. That was pincushion number 11 of the series of 20. I will see you again with pincushion number 12.